So what will my favorite reads of 2024 be? Let me predict. So no, I don't really have the power to predict or foresee the future, but I do want to talk about what my opinion is on what some of my favorite books of 2024 will be. Now, I recently released my top 10 reads of 2023, kind of based off some of the same criteria personally that I had for those books and what made them my favorite. I just want to look at some of the books I plan to read in 2024. Now, this won't be all of them, and hopefully there'll be some surprises, and I don't know, in a good way. I don't know what it'll be, but I do want to try to predict what my favorite reads of 2024 will be, and who knows, maybe I can go back and look at it at the end and see how right or wrong I was. So let's get started. Now, first of all, in full disclosure, I've already started a few books, but I still want to include those in this year's predictions. So I'm going to do that. Probably should have been done in December, but hey, I'm doing it now. So anyway, so the first book that I've already read, I've already completed it. This is probably my favorite read, Fool's Errand by Robin Hobb. This is probably my favorite book so far in the Realm of the Elderlings series. But also, this is standing as a representative of future Realm of the Elderlings books that just might be my favorite. I don't know that I'll finish Realm of the Elderlings in 2024. I hope to get close. We'll see. This is already a contender for my top books of the year is already a contender for that. Who knows? Maybe my number one book of the year. But anyway, I'm predicting that Fool's Errand or one of the future books in the Realm of the Elderlings could possibly be some of my favorite reads of 2024. Next is a book that I have already started, and I am enjoying it, doing a buddy read with some other booktubers, and I'm enjoying it. I'm about around 100 pages, maybe a little over 100 pages into it. This is The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. You can see the artwork there is just outstanding. I am enjoying it. It's a dark fantasy. So far, everything that I would want to find in fantasy has already been introduced, really, in the first 100 pages of this book. And I can't imagine how much better it's going to get as I complete. It's a pretty thick book. As I complete this book and move on to the other two in this trilogy. So hopefully at least one, because I'm only going to choose one per author, hopefully at least one of those books may end up in my favorite books of the year for 2024. Next is a book that, again, I've already started. I am around 150 pages or so, maybe close to 200 pages into Leviathan Wakes by James S.A. Corey. The first book of their series, The Expanse. Heard Mike from Mike's book reviews talk about this last year. I've been wanting to get to it. I actually watched the first season, and I'm watching the second season currently of this show, and it made me want to read the book. So I started reading the first book, and I'm loving it. They're kind of short chapters. So far, 2 POVs. I'm enjoying everything about it right now, and it has just been a wonderful experience. And of course, I've got a good bit left to go. I trust the experience is going to get better, and I plan to continue this series. I don't know how far. I highly doubt I will finish this series in 2024, but I do plan to get a little further, hopefully a lot further. So one of those books could very well end up in my top spots at the end of 2024. Next is a self-published book. I read The Severing Sun by Von Roycroft in 2023. It ended up on my top 10 list, and I have no doubt that very likely the second book in his series, Bold Ascension, I think there's 4 or 5 books in this, I can't remember, that's going to be, but Bold Ascension by Von Roycroft, I have high expectations for this book. And I don't feel like that's going to be a problem for Vaughn to meet in the story. As good as the first story was, I believe this is going to be great, and I highly expect it to be one of my favorite reads of 2024. Next is an author that I was first introduced to in 2023. I did not share runners-up or honorable mentions in my top 10 list. If I did share it, then one of those books would have been Recursion by Blake Crouch. I plan to continue in his works. I don't know how many books of his I'll be able to read this year. Hopefully more than one, hopefully several. But I did pick this one up that I'm planning on. I know I'm planning on reading this. The Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. As good as Recursion was, everybody who reads his books tells me that this is better. I say everybody. There may be someone out there with a different opinion. Most people who've told me says this is better. This is one of his best books. And I am so excited about getting to that. Science fiction thriller. I'm becoming to where I really love thrillers. And so this is something that I am anticipating. I plan to start a trilogy this year that I should have read already. In fact, most of what's next is things that I should have read already, but I haven't. I'm kind of late to the game, but here it is. So this is a book that I plan on reading, and I plan on reading the trilogy, and I have no doubts that this or one of the books will be a favorite. Jade City by Fonda Lee. Fantasy, mafia, Asian inspired, all of that sounds exciting to me, and so I've looked forward to reading this for a while. In fact, I actually had planned on reading it in 2023, and one thing led to another, juggling books around, and I ended up not getting to it. But I absolutely plan on getting to it this year, and I hope to see it be one of my favorite books. The next is a very popular book, especially here on BookTube, or the first book of a very popular series by Joe Abercrombie, The Blade Itself. Now, some people would think, well, you haven't read that already. No, I've not read that already. In fact, I had mentioned in previous videos that I've really never read grimdark stories. I've really never read grimdark books. In fact, the first grimdark book that I read would have been We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle, and that trilogy, and that may be all of the grimdark that I've read. So I look forward to moving along in what's very popular grimdark and fantasy, The Blade Itself. I've heard a lot of good about this, but I've also heard it gets better throughout the series. Again, I don't know how many of his books I'll be able to get to this year. I absolutely plan on at least reading the first trilogy. Then maybe from there I can move on to some of his standalones and the second trilogy. But I do plan on reading that. Here's another book that was new this year. Again, I stay behind on a lot of my reads. I'm usually 1 year or 10 years behind of everybody else. This is a book that I'm not quite as late, but I still want to get to this year. The Will of the Many by James Allington. I've heard so much good about it. A little mixed, but even the mix that I've heard is still good. Some have said, well, it's not their favorite book they've ever read, but it's still a really good book. Others say it's the best book they've ever read. Well, that absolutely excites me about getting to this. And so I have not read James Allington. I have the Lycanus trilogy on my bookshelf. In fact, I probably should have picked one of those books up to mention it. So we'll just say James Allington. Hopefully one of his books will be a favorite book of mine this year. Here's another one. Now, I need to qualify this next book. I need to qualify this statement. I do not know if anything that this next author writes will be my favorite. So far, nothing he's written has been my favorite. That doesn't mean it's bad, and that doesn't mean this is a bad author. I'm not trying to be critical, very overly negative of him. But just for me, we each have different things that works for us. And so far, nothing's wowed me. Nothing has just swept me off my feet. In fact, I DNF'd one of his most popular trilogies this past year that I've already talked about, and that is Brandon Sanderson, Mistborn. I DNF'd the second book, and I'm not going to continue with that series, but I have heard so much good about Stormlight Archive, and so I plan on diving into it this year. And this is going to be, I've read 5 books so far, or 4.5 books, not counting the one I DNF'd. So I've read those of Brandon Sanderson. I plan on trying to give Stormlight Archive a try, and we'll see where it goes from there. From what everybody else tells me, one of these books should be a favorite book. One of these books should be a top book of mine. We'll see. We'll see. I'm very hopeful. I'm not going into this expecting failure. I'm not going into this expecting not to like it. I want to love this. I want to love it. And so we'll see what happens. The next book that again, I'm just going to use this book as an example of other books. I read 10 Stephen King books in 2023, and he became one of my favorite authors. Just one of the greatest storytellers we're likely to ever see. Probably one of the next Stephen, outside of the Dark Tower series. Right now I'm currently reading through the Dark Tower series. Outside of that, probably one of the next Stephen King books I hope to read will be Needful Things. A very popular book from this author. A lot of people love it. This may be a top book for me for the year. I hope Stephen King is somewhere on this list. As much as I loved him in 23, surely I'm going to find something that I'll love in 24. To my left, this is my left, I see my entire bookshelf, my entire collection of Stephen King books. I hope to get to several of those books this year. Who knows which one will be a favorite? Maybe this one, maybe another one. We'll see. The last book I'm going to mention. Now, I'll say this one more time. I'm going to read hopefully a lot more books than just the ones that I mentioned. I think this is 11 or 12 books. Hopefully I'll read a lot more books. Maybe other books will jump in and be my favorite. I'm leaving that open. But there is a series that is a beloved series. I don't know that it's 100% beloved. There's a lot of people who haven't liked it. But most people who I've talked to have, and I have not read it. And probably the biggest shock that I've not read this series, and that would be A Song of Ice and Fire, A Game of Thrones being the first book. I plan on diving into this series this year. I absolutely plan on finishing the series. I don't even think I'll allow myself to DNF unless I have a very, very good reason to do it. I plan on reading this series this year, and I'm excited about it. And I have no doubt that one of these books will show up on the list next year to be one of my top 10 reads of the year. Everything I've heard about it suggests that. I know that we're still waiting on the 5th book. I'm not waiting because I've not started the series. But hey, maybe next year I can join the miserable crowd of people who says they can't wait for the Winds of Winter to come out. These are some books that I hope to be my favorite books of 2024. I have no idea what's actually going to happen. I have no doubt that they will. There's actually another book that I just looked at that I couldn't find, and it's because I moved it. The Book That Wouldn't Burn. I have no doubt that this may be a favorite book of mine in 2024. It wasn't on my shelf behind me. I forgot that I had moved it to a different shelf. Glad I saw that before we closed out. So these are the books that I hope, by Mark Lawrence. So these are the books that I expect will be favorite books of mine. Already this is more than 10, so that all of them won't make my top 10 list. But who knows, maybe most or all will be on my top 10 list. What about you? What do you expect to love in 2024?